Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. In my social media group, I posted a comment where I was commenting on President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, who has introduced a well-funded free education in that country. And I compared it with Zimbabwe's own collapsed education system. Decades of poor funding have reduced Zimbabwe's education system, which was one of the best in Africa, to one of the worst. And this is a comment that I received from one of the members in the group. Then someone says Mukori only criticizes Chamisa. This was an interesting comment because it was totally different. And in this case here, he clearly had also noticed that it was a far cry from the usual barrage of negative comments from the so-called Chamisa Chete Brigade. You say anything critical of Chamisa and they will be on your case like a rush. And so what this individual was saying is, Mukori does not criticize Chamisa just for the sake of it. Criticizes what I see wrong, be it from Chamisa or from anybody else. And I totally agree with that. But the Chamisa Chete Brigade don't care about whatever criticism one gives on Zanu PF. You criticize Chamisa and you cross the double red lines. This is actually nothing new. This is a mentality that has been observed by many people in Zimbabwe. Among them, the late nEdson Zvobgo. And he said he called it the Mozambique syndrome, because he said when they were in Mozambique before the country's independence, if any of his Zanu PF colleagues lost an argument, they would accuse you of being a CIA to avoid the substantive issues. Today, they call you an American puppet. He was right. Zimbabweans have taken to that mentality where if they cannot defend their position, they will resort to trivial issues, make a mountain out of a molehill, or worse still, accuse you of something that is outrageous, just to avoid the substantive issues. But my argument is, this has been counterproductive because it has stifled meaningful debate and has reduced us into a nation where we cannot make any progress. Each time we've got a substantive issue to discuss, we find ourselves being sidetracked to discuss trivial matters, to accuse the other side of even some of the most outrageous things. In the case of our friends in the opposition, they'll accuse you of being a Zanu PF puppet. How can I be a Zanu PF puppet when I've consistently called for free, fair, and credible elections? When is Zanu PF shown any interest in free, fair, and credible elections? But when you've got that mentality, you cannot think of those things. But this has been one of the root causes of why we are a failed state. We've been stuck with this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF regime for 45 years and counting, because we have failed to define what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. When you look at some of the MDC supporters, we have been conned to participate in these flawed elections time and time again. You can understand why this Mozambique syndrome has reduced their IQ to that of a garden slug. They can't think. How could you be conned into believing that Triple C would win rigged elections? Because, as Chamisa said, I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. When you know yourself that he has not done any such thing. Tim Pachedu had come up with a report that said Zimbabwe's voters' roll was in shambles. And yet you believe such nonsense. And what is more, some of these Chamisa Chete brigade, even now with the benefit of hindsight, they are refusing to accept that Chamisa lied to them, that Chamisa is a liar. That doesn't help the country at all. Because what it is doing is it's making them vulnerable to being conned again. Chamisa is going to tell them an identical idiotic lie that he's going to win the 2028 elections with no reforms implemented. They will believe him. They will participate in those elections only to give Zanu PF legitimacy. We're back to square one. We have got to accept that this weakness, this Mozambique syndrome, is a serious weakness that we must address as a nation. Because it has stifled meaningful debate and meaningful democratic competition, without which we cannot even define what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections in this day and age. If we fail to hold free, fair, and credible elections in 2028, which is almost guaranteed, because Zanu PF has not implemented any reforms then we should not participate in those flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. That is the argument. And if people are going to be conned into believing that Chamisa will come up with solutions of how to win rigged elections and be conned to participate in those flawed elections again, as has happened so many times in the past, then yes, we have a serious problem. We are failing to think. We're just behaving like green bombers with a nose for trivial matters. Just avoid the substantive issues. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.